Welcome to another segment of the BYU Management Society's Learn from Professionals initiative. Our goal is to provide guidance to young adults that are either exploring various careers or ready to jumpstart a career. Today, we have an opportunity to learn from a seasoned professional in space engineering, Mr. Michael Martinez. Mr. Martinez currently serves as Vice President of Space Engineering for Maxar, where he is responsible for health and safety of Maxar's Earth observation satellites, ground development, integration, launch, and operations of satellite constellation mission. Michael has been in the commercial remote sensing industry for more than 20 years, joining space imaging in 1997. After a series of mergers and acquisitions, space imaging eventually became part of Maxar. Prior to joining Maxar, Michael held a variety of technical positions at the Naval Research Laboratory, McDonnell Douglas, and Lockheed Martin, where he was responsible for satellite design, development, integration, and tests, and ground systems. In addition to his work at Maxar, Michael serves on the Colorado State University's WSCOE Dean's Advisory Board. Michael served on the World Economic Forum's Future Space Council from 2017 to 2022. He also earned a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering from Colorado State University in 1986 and performed postgraduate work in aerospace from the University of Southern California. In addition to his work, Michael enjoys skiing and climbing and hiking and travel and solar eclipse chasing. So welcome, Michael. Could you tell us a little bit more about your solar eclipse chasing?
Hi, Scott. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, so I do chase solar eclipse totality across the globe, and what that does, it offers the opportunity to travel in some unique areas of the world while seeing a fantastic phenomenon between the sun, Earth, and the moon. The line between along the Earth where the totality scribes into across the globe gives us the opportunity to look at what region where there's good weather, other opportunities to do things along with the trips, and then have the totality of the eclipse be part of the cream on the top of the trip.
And so where's the most unique place you've gone to?
Not to some pretty unique places. I'd say one of them is in Svalbard. Svalbard is north, it's not called islands, north of Norway. For that trip, through satellite imagery, we had recognized that there's a ship that gets frozen in a fjord every year. And so what we did was we rented out the ship for a week, and then we took dog sleds from a town called Longyearbyen. Took us about 2 hours to get to the ship. And then from that ship, every day we would go off and search glaciers and dog sled around the area. And then the opportunity there for the eclipse was the ground is all white from the snow and the ice. And so seeing the eclipse with that as our backdrop, and the fact that you're so far north, you're at 79 degrees north, watching the sun go horizontally across the sky versus up and down. It's pretty fantastic.
So Michael, you sound like a space engineer. So what made you decide to pursue a career in space engineering?
You know, it's interesting. If you go back July 16th, 1969, I was 6.5 years old, and I was able to witness the first man on the moon. And that intrigued me at an early stage of life. That's how fantastic that was, watching the Apollo program, followed by the Challenger and the space shuttle aspect of it. it just drew me into wanting to do something with regard to space.
So tell us more about your career path and what's helped you to become so successful in your career.
Well, when I started out, I graduated with, my undergrad was electrical engineering, and I first started in semiconductors. And about 18 months into the job, I was traveling from Colorado to Minnesota. And on that flight, I met a gentleman that we talked the entire flight. And in that conversation, towards the end of it, because he was asking me a lot about what I do and how I do it. At the end of the flight, he basically said, I've been interviewing you if you didn't realize that. You listed in space. And of course, I got all excited. And then he offered that this would be a job at the Naval Research Labs in the Washington, D.C. area. And what I didn't know at the time, that the U.S. Navy was the first U.S. entity to launch a satellite into space, and they were the first to have into space from aspect of our U.S. government. That I found very intriguing, and that's where I was able to first cut my teeth into space. I took a job there, and that got me started.
That's interesting. Michael, can you tell us what is the best career advice someone has offered to you?
So there are two things that come to mind, and it kind of goes back to finishing the question I didn't finish out for you, and that was, what has helped me in my career. But two things come to mind, and that was, learn from leaders and be a leader. And by doing that, you need to be humble and you need to listen. Know that there's always someone that has more knowledge that you can learn from and grow off of that. And that first bit of advice has really helped me out from really standing back, listening to others, knowing that there are a lot of people that are way smarter than me, and learning from them is a really important thing to do. The other second piece of advice that I've really appreciated is that start investing right away. From, as you're looking at your future, start now. There's a lot that goes into that as you first starting your career, you're first making money for the very first time. I had a lot of student debt. I paid for my own school. I had to work multiple jobs while I was in school. And still having that debt was an interesting piece of advice from saying just start investing right away in your future, because what I really wanted to do was just pay off my debt straight, not save or go into any kind of 401 type of thing. But I did listen to that advice, and it's been very helpful for me.
Sure. I think that's great advice. Michael, can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you do at Maxar?
Sure. At Maxar, as indicated, I'm responsible for the health and safety of our satellites for Earth observation, which includes the ground infrastructure that supports it. So what does that mean? We currently have 4 Earth observation satellites that image the Earth. We are in the process of building out 6 more that we're going to launch within the next year. My duties and my task is essentially maintaining Maxar's mission for imaging the Earth, providing Earth intelligence around how to make the world a better place. And that's part of our mission statement. It's what we strive to do, and that is create a transparent world such that we can make the world a better place. Our imagery is at 30 centimeter. 80% of the imagery you see on your phone, be Google or Apple or Bing or whatever, comes from us. So that commercial imagery comes from us, where most of our customers are US governments, other international governments, and then on the commercial side, you have the Googles and Apples and others entities there. So maintaining the health and safety means that I have a core team of spacecraft engineers who make sure that these satellites are healthy and are all working nominally. Part of that is with the navigation team. There's a lot of debris in space, and so you have to know what we call collisions, recognizing that we may be in a dangerous spot of colliding with other debris and making sure we can maneuver out of the way of it. There's calibration of the cameras and the sensors, ensuring understanding atmospheric effects and how that impacts what you're visually looking at the ground, the energy that comes off of the ground, and how you sense that data to create quality imagery. So you've got a lot of calibration in there. And then on the ground side of it, it's the command and control, it's the mission planning, how we're going to task across the constellation of satellites to be most efficient and meet our customers' needs.
How did you get your current position that you have as Vice President of Space Engineering?
So I started off from, when my career started off in the Naval Research Lab and from the McDonnell office and Lockheed Martin. At the lab, I did help to build and integrate satellites, launch them, and fly them. And so you had being in a lab environment, you did a lot of different things. When I was at the McDonnell Douglas and Lockheed aspect, I was more on building satellites, integrating them, testing them, and then launching them when someone else could then take the ownership of that satellite and fly the satellites and operate them. When I went into the commercial world of space imaging, I continued to be focused on the space side of it, but ultimately, as we moved to become Digital Globe, which ultimately became Maxar, I grew from the space side into the ground infrastructure side as well. And as part of that, my career progressed, going from manager to senior manager to director, et cetera, into vice president. Really a lot stemmed by my expertise, and what I say is having really good leaders underneath me that support me and help you grow. One of my key things that I'll tell people is you always want to work yourself out of a job, because you can't, if you become such a value in the space that you are, you will never be able to move in a different direction, either upward or laterally into a different role, unless you have someone that can take over what you're doing and be feeling confident that they can do as good or better than you. And so yourself out of a job is a very good thing for you.
So, Michael, has your career been a continual upward path, or have you had to overcome any significant obstacles?
It's generally been an upward path. I haven't had any real obstacles. The obstacles that I would say is continuing to stay educated, understanding new technologies, understand what's new in the world and what's different, to really push on differentiating yourself and differentiating the work you're doing. Because, for instance, in the commercial Earth observation business, Maxar differentiates itself because of the technology and things we do, and staying ahead of the game on that is super important. And I don't know if I'd call it an obstacle, but it is definitely a thing that's always pressing, is always understanding what's new and understanding what does that mean.
So, continuing along that education theme, what are the general education requirements for someone that is really interested in becoming an engineer and working in the space industry?
From my perspective and the role that I play, engineering background is super important. That base level of engineering or even computer science background is very important from a technical aspect of understanding. The other idea from a from a space engineering aspect is understanding more about what space is, understanding what different orbits are. What is a low Earth orbit compared to a geosynchronous orbit? What does that mean and why?
So you have been, it sounds like a lifetime of education is very important to you. In addition to formal education, a master's, bachelor's degree, are there any certifications or advanced learning that you found that's helpful to continuing to be successful in your profession?
You know, I would say yes. At least it's stuff I encourage my teams as well. So, you know, as the technology is moved from on-prem data centers to cloud environments, cloud compute, getting it certified across multiple cloud providers and their certifications. You have Azure, you have AWS, you know, IBM, etc. They all have uniqueness in their cloud environments that creates different certs. So staying up with research and what they mean is can be extremely helpful and make you very valuable. The other is just continuing it in general. So for me, as an example, I didn't go off and finish an MBA, but I did go off and do additional classes in continuing education in the business side of the world because of dealing with the financial aspects of the work and understanding business cases and the return on investments and what does that mean for the business. It was very helpful to get some continuing education in that space as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so sounds like you really enjoy what you do, but there's also some challenges. So what do you consider to be the most important rewards and challenges of being an engineer in the space industry?
You know, for me, it's super exciting when you're working on new technology, cutting edge, doing things that no one's doing, no one else is doing, or enhancing what somebody else has done. Has been super exciting. And I think the thing that gets challenging in that space is you got to be careful on when you're looking at what we call shiny objects and something that looks very appealing and you get excited about it, that it doesn't distract from what you're trying to do in your end goal. Because a lot of times these shiny objects, these kind of cool endeavors that are not important for the business or to what your end goal is, can distract and take away from getting to the end goal itself. So that's a challenge. It's a challenge I see with my engineering teams. They you know, engineers like to solve problems and discover and do some really neat things. And sometimes that can be a distraction to what needs to be done.
Hmm. So earlier, Michael, you talked about a career advice that you had received was to listen to leaders and become a leader. What do you consider to be the most important characteristics of leaders, successful leaders in your profession?
I think key thing there is listening, understanding, and being cooperative and collaborative. Being able to negotiate when you see problems or you're working with across multiple people and teams, and understand the traits across different aspects of problem solving, be it an engineering problem or a business problem or even a personnel problem. But how do you work through and compromise and get the results that are best for everyone? But I'd say being proactive, being decisive, and a strong listener to what others are doing is super important. Being open to other people's ideas.
Yeah, I agree with you. So, Michael, I know that the industry is rapidly changing. Lots of things that are going on all the time. I think about over our lifetimes, just the changes that we've seen. But what are some of the trends that you believe are most impacting the industry now?
Commercializing spaces is impacting this whole domain by a lot. I mean, the fact that you can launch satellites for pennies compared to hundreds and thousands of dollars like you did in the past. So the cost of getting into space used to be a barrier for entry to get into the space domain. Those cost breakdowns coming down have enabled small commercial entities, universities, a whole plethora of, of non-government entities to enter into space. And that in itself is exciting. It's driving new technologies, it's driving efficiencies. And I think a lot of people are also finding out that space is, well, it may feel like it's easy because there's so many things happening. Space is hard. We've got a very harsh environment. We've got lots of things happening and how you communicate. You basically have a remote control system that you can't touch. And, much like your laptop, you have to reboot every so often, or your computer, you can't do that on orbit. It's and you've got to ensure that if you have a 5 to 10 year mission, that how do you ensure that it flies 5 to 10 years? So that part of it will continue to be a challenge, but it's super exciting to see with the commercialization of space, how it's driving new things.
So if a young person is interested in exploring a career in space engineering, how would you recommend that they do that?
Say, an engineering background doesn't necessarily need to be aerospace. An aerospace background it kind of funnels you into getting into the space side of things, but basic engineering background or software background is key to that. Having that flavor of and challenges of how you solve problems. I would say the other side of this, the coin there, is from physics and a scientist background. I have some team members on my team that are coming from a physics or atmospheric science, and that scientist background has been really important to look at problems different than what an engineer does, and that's good.
So now you have a young person they've gone to school, they've got their basic academic work done behind them, and now they're ready to jump into the workforce and get that career jump started. What advice would you give them for doing that, for entering into the career and finding that company that they really just mesh with?
I think there's two things there. Do your research. Research on the company, understand what the mission statement is, understand what is it that they're producing or supplying or servicing that, one, makes you want to join and makes you want to have interest in the company. I see an interview as it's basically two ways. It's basically the interview is the company's interviewing you to see if you're a person that fits. But on the other side of it, you should be interviewing the company to see, do I want to fit into this company? Because it's important that you excel in your new endeavor and feel like it's worthy and worth the being part of that. So a lot of times when I'm interviewing or discussing a career with a new employee or potential new employee, if they don't understand what Maxar does or have an idea of, for instance, a space background, they've not done a lot of research to understand the different aspects of Earth observation, it first shows that are they really interested or not. It doesn't feel like they're interested if they don't do the research. So coming in with the understanding what a company does is super important, doing the research behind that. I would also say it's show off how proactive you are. You know, it's important that people understand that they could give you a job and leave you alone and you're gonna get it done. And if you can get that message across in your interview process, super important.
Mhm. So I know that it's important we all want to be successful, right, in our occupation, but we also don't want to burn out. So with your hobbies, which sound amazing, um, what advice can you give a young person about being successful in business, but also having balance in their life?
There's, work-life balance, that's a word or a term that's thrown around a lot, but it is super important. And knowing that a work-life balance doesn't necessarily mean it's always balanced at the same time throughout. But there are times that you may have to work an 80 to 100-hour weeks at a time because you press through to get a mission done or a satellite off the ground. But balance it with knowing that you're getting some time off to decompress, getting some of yourself time is super important. Being with family, being whatever it is that allows you to reset and kind of recharge yourself to get back into the game. Because working, a hard press, like I was mentioning, maybe 100-hour weeks for a couple of weeks, a person needs to reset and recharge. And I would say the advice there is, what is it that gets you there? For me, it's getting outdoors, it's traveling, it's being with family. For some people, it may be reading books, it would be long time. We all have our own different ways of basically recharging, rebalancing ourselves.
Michael, what advice can you offer young adults that are interested in living, having a career that is meaningful and productive?
It gets back to when you're looking at a company, there's a lot of reasons we look at companies. There's the job, the role that it looks inspiring, money. Money is a big key part of that. How does that fit into my career? How am I thinking about that? But I think it's super important to understand the mission of that company. One of the things that's held me from moving around so much, and one of the things I don't see a lot of attrition in my teams, because the mission is to make the world better, to do what we can to make the world a better place to live. Seeing that we've saved people's lives, an example, rescued them from some harsh, from harm. In the satellite imagery business and the analytics, we will do a lot of imagery post, say, a hurricane and earthquake, and then create basically data and help for how does these research or rescue teams get into an area to help people after a big catastrophe. Wildfires, helping the firefighters on the front line understand where the hot spots are, where the fire is going, how is it moving. And then things that I've been a part of, which I'm very proud of, is we saved 3,000 slaves that were illegal fishing vessels in Indonesia. And what was happening there was these fishing vessels would be out in the water with these enslaved people doing the fishing, and they'd never go to port because they pull another ship next to that ship, and they offload all of the fish that they caught, and then that vessel would go into port, offload their fish to get paid.
Hmm.
An AP writer had tried to get behind this because they knew this kind of activity was happening, and we worked with her on essentially recognizing where this was happening, imaging it, getting basically images of the vessel numbers, getting that to the authorities, and then ultimately there were 3,000 enslaved fishermen that were able to get free and go back to their families. There was a Pulitzer Prize winning author that did that, and it was exciting to know that you're doing things that really made a difference.
Yeah, that's a big impact that you made. Earlier you talked about uh, learning from others, learning from other leaders. So can you talk just a little bit about mentoring and perhaps how you've mentored others or you've been mentored yourself? And then also, as a young person entering a profession, how can they seek out mentors?
Yeah, so I started mentoring college teams about 5 years ago, and for me, it's been super rewarding because the college seniors doing their projects, they want, uh, they're so hungry for information and to do things, and it's really refreshing to be around them. So for me, it helps recharge me on the excitement of someone who's just coming into their career and just starting their career. So that helps me. But on the mentor side of it, helping students or others that are at work, understanding what their career objectives are, where do they want to go in life, um, and how to basically not guide them, but advise on certain aspects of, maybe you should try certain aspects of things. One of the things that I find it's very challenging for people is when you ask them to do two things as a mentor, and that is go write your obituary. What do you want people to talk about you when you're no longer around? What do you want your legacy to be? And that can be really difficult because if you want your legacy to be that you helped people and you did all these things, and then it's like, well, how do you get there to do that? What do you want your legacy to be? Or similarly, um, what do you want people to say on your retirement about you and your career? And that's more kind of a business focus, but it's also about your character and how do you want to be viewed by others and how you want to work towards that goal of getting to the end game of, well, how do I want to be viewed when I'm no longer working at a company?
That's all great advice. Um, so how important is networking as an engineer and how would you recommend doing so?
Networking, I think, is extremely important. And I think it's not just as an engineer, just in professional lives. Um, and the way I see, one thing is that you should know is, especially, and I think across all industries, it's a very small world, and it gets smaller all the time with communications and whatnot. Today, you may be working for someone, and 5 years from now, they may be working for you, or vice versa. Very common thing to find that you don't burn any bridges, and you continue your relationships even after they've moved into a different swim lane. So if you're working along with someone and they've moved into a different career growth, staying in touch with those people one way or another is super important. Other aspects of getting to know and networking is there's conferences. So for instance, there's national space conferences that occur yearly, other types of conferences, technical conferences that occur. And it's not just about learning what's happening at each booth or listening to someone talk on a stage, but it's actually getting to know other people and getting to know what they do and start that professional conversations that you can continue. Because a year from now, you may remember, I spoke to Scott about this subject and it seemed like he had some expertise on it. I'm going to reach out to Scott to see if we can connect and I can get some advice from him. Those things are very important.
Sure, I think that's important. So, Michael, in closing, is there any other career or life advice that you'd like to offer to young adults?
Well, I would say the same thing that somebody told me, and that is as soon as you start a job, if they have a 401, maximize if you can do 12 to 12%, and get used to not having that 12% from the very beginning versus taxing yourself once you've gotten used to a certain amount of money, and then now all of a sudden you feel like you're taxing yourself for taking that away. So from the very beginning, start off with pouring as much of that money into a retirement or future endeavor as possible. And then on the career advice from that others have taught me, and that is around listening. Listen to the graybeards, because they do have things to say, but also help them listen to you for all the new stuff that you're going to bring along.
Well, thank you, Michael. We appreciate the time that you've taken today to offer career building advice to young adults interested in space engineering. So to wrap up this video, we'd like to remind our viewers that they can either reach out on their own to seasoned professionals like Michael to schedule an informational interview, learn about professions, or ask for an introduction to that professional from maybe someone that they know. To prepare for informational interviews, we recommend that you watch the video on this website titled Conducting Informational Interviews. And again, thank you, Michael. You're awesome, and we really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. I really appreciate you asking me to do this, and if I could help at least one person, that would be fantastic.